Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. So in today's episode, we are going to be covering the Vampire Diaries Season 3. So it actually took me a while to put this video together. I probably finished the entire series maybe 5 months ago, if that. And back then, I was really recapping every single thing that happened, and that was just not feasible for me to have a quick turnaround time because I watched a lot of shows, and so I had to revamp my process for talking about these TV shows, and so it took me a while to kind of get back into the groove of Vampire Diaries, reviewing my notes, reviewing articles and things like that, just to refresh my memory on what I watched and what I thought about the show as I was watching it. And so being that this is covering a full season already and there's 20 episodes, there's a lot that happens in the Vampire Diaries, and so I'm not going to be able to cover every little thing that happened. I will be talking about the big picture things that happened in this season. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode. Alrighty, so starting with our 5 key points for the season. For the first point, we have Jeremy is seeing ghosts. He's specifically seeing Anna and Vicky. So we know that at the beginning of season 3, Stefan is forced to work with Klaus, and he's doing this in order to save Damon's life. Damon had been bitten by a werewolf, and so he needed Klaus's blood to heal himself. So we have Elena and Damon kind of um, having their individual processes for how they want to go about like rescuing Stefan. So we have Damon kind of like brushing it off and making it seem like he's not really doing much, and then we have Elena basically doing everything that she can to find Stefan and bring him home, that sort of thing. And so we actually learn that Damon is doing a lot behind the scenes to find Stefan, but he's covering a lot of it up and hiding it from Elena so that she doesn't really see how bad it is. And so we do have at some point that Stefan warns them to stop looking for him. He is basically leaving a trail of dead bodies all over the country for them to find, and then he even kills Damon's girlfriend Andy as a warning for them to back off. We also learned that Stefan and Klaus actually met each other back in the 20s, and so we know that when he met Klaus and Rebecca, he was eventually compelled to forget them, and here we are with him kind of relearning what that relationship was like and the fact that he was in love with Rebecca and that sort of thing. We also have Caroline being on the outs with Tyler. They are excited about school, about college, that sort of thing, and Tyler doesn't really know what's next for him, being that he is now a werewolf and he's dealing with that, trying to find his tribe, that sort of thing. And so she gets jealous seeing him with someone else, and they end up sleeping together. And we do see the scene where she's leaving his house and she's shot with vervain, and she is attacked by Mrs. Lockwood, and then she's eventually tortured by her dad. Her dad is this person who is part of the council, so he is aware of vampires. He doesn't want a daughter who's a vampire, and so he is torturing her to kind of get her to no longer act like a vampire. We see that every time she has the urge to bite him or whatever, or is reacting to blood, he burns her with the sunlight so that he's conditioning her to not want to act on that impulse. And so while all of this is happening, we have Tyler trying to figure out what happened to Caroline, where she is, and while all of that is happening, we have Tyler adding himself to his mother for being a werewolf. I think for some reason she was not aware of this, and so he's the one who has to tell her that his father's side is basically werewolves. They have the gene, whatever, the curse rather, and so his mother is having to kind of like navigate having a son who's special, who's different, and she's aware of vampires, but now she has a son who's a different type of beast, and so obviously she wants to protect him. She wants to back off of everything that's happening with Caroline, and so we just see her in this weird place because she is on the council, but then now she needs to protect her son. We also have Jeremy cheating on Bonnie with Anna, and there comes a point where he's able to feel her again, and so we know that Vicky is the other ghost that he's seeing, and she's able to make a deal and that will allow her to come back on Earth, and she basically has to kill Elena, I think, to restore the balance of whatever is happening. And so she ends up being able to do that, and she also is able to connect with Maddie, and I think Maddie at some point commits suicide in order to see her, because right now only Jeremy is able to see her. What this results in is all of the dead vampires are able to come back. And so we have vampires from the tomb. So we had that season with Anna and her family, her mom, Pearl, and all of that coming back. And so those vampires are coming back from the tomb, and they have a vengeance. They are angry at the founders' descendants. They want to enact terror on the town, and so this is not good. We also have Lexi coming back to work with Stefan because she was previously able to get him to kind of snap out of his Ripper lust, his bloodlust, that sort of thing. So she's able to get him to turn his humanity back on. And because at this point, Elena and Damon are not able to do that, and so they really need Lexi. And so what happens is she ends up getting sent away before she's able to successfully get him to turn on his humanity. And so we really see how that plays out for the rest of the season. We also have, as a result of all of these dead vampires coming back, we have Damon being tortured by Mason Lockwood. And he's back specifically to help Tyler because he knows that Tyler is now dealing with being a werewolf and that transition. We also have a moment where we have Mason and Damon kind of interacting. He tortures Damon for a little bit, but then he leads him to this cave under the Lockwood house. And before he can tell Damon what is in the cave, he disappears. And so obviously this happens throughout the course of the season, but I'm just giving you kind of like the spoilers up front, if that makes sense. And so going into my second point, we have the originals are being hunted by their father, Michael, and we learn about their past. So we know that Stefan a while back gave Elena a necklace. It turns out that that necklace actually belongs to Rebecca. And so Klaus needs this necklace to connect with the original witch, which we find out is his mother. And this will help him to make hybrids because remember, at this point, he is trying to create hybrids, but they keep dying, they keep going crazy, and he has no idea what is going wrong. And everything that he needed to complete in order to make it possible for him to make hybrids has been completed. But what he doesn't know is that Elena is still alive, and this is why his hybrids are not able to survive the transition into becoming hybrid. And so we get to the scene where we have Klaus and Stefan returning to Mystic Falls. He ends up torturing them at the school. He forces Stefan to turn off his humanity, I think, and he forces him to feed on Elena's blood, which he obviously doesn't want to do, but he's forced to do this. And then he also forces Tyler to become a hybrid, so they need to do certain things in order to save Tyler from dying. So they're able to figure out that Elena's blood is secure to creating successful hybrids. And so obviously Klaus is now going to want to take Elena, kidnap her, keep her in captivity so that he can use her blood in order to make more hybrids. So this means that he would eventually kill her. And one thing that happens as a result of Tyler becoming a hybrid, he is now sired to Klaus, and so whatever Klaus says he has to do, he is going to do. And so we do have this moment where obviously we know that Caroline and Tyler are dating, and he tells Tyler to bite Caroline, and Tyler refuses to do this, which he's able to do, and Klaus is like, okay, whatever. But then we have a later scene where we see Tyler going to kiss Caroline, and he actually like nips her or bites her, and we see that he, even though he does want to resist what Klaus has told him, he's not actually able to do that. And so what ends up happening is that I can't recall if Caroline gets bitten by Tyler at that point and she's in trouble or at risk of dying. We know that she has to go to Klaus in order to get his blood so that she can be saved. And so Klaus is kind of really forcing her to make this decision that she wants him to save her because at this point Caroline thinks that Klaus is this monster. He's kind of like falling in love with her, trying to woo her, that sort of thing, and she's resisting him, she's rejecting him, she doesn't like him, and so he's really forcing her to beg for his life and let him be the person to save her. We also have Michael comes back. I know that I'm saying his name wrong, but I'm going to continue saying Michael. He comes back, and then we have kind of like the backstory of the originals, and we kind of learn why he is scared of them. So Michael is their father, and he's trying to kill them. He's basically a vampire who hunts other vampires, and so we do eventually learn that there's symbols on this cave that Mason led Damon to, and then we also kind of learn from Rebecca the backstory of their family and how they became vampires. Basically, they lived near this village of men who were werewolves, and the men turned. Some of her brothers went to watch, and one of her brothers was killed, and so her father was really distraught by this, and he wanted a way to protect their family, and so their mother, Esther, became the original witch, and she was able to do the spell that turned them into vampires. And one of the major kind of like points in this storyline is that there are drawings on the cave, and for a long time it was thought that their father Michael killed their mother Esther because Klaus was somebody else's child, and so I guess he kind of never really got over that, and so they thought that he basically got revenge on her for cheating on him or whatever. And so what we learn is through the drawings that Klaus actually killed his mother. And so at some point, Rebecca finds this out and she is not willing to forgive her brother for this because she really stood by him, thinking that everyone else was abandoning him because he was this hybrid. Even though his werewolf side was dormant, he was still the first hybrid and very different from everyone else. And then next we have the homecoming dance. So we have a plan for the group to attack Klaus. They knock Stefan out of play because they know that his loyalty is questionable. He's obviously under Klaus's influence and has to do whatever Klaus tells him. And so we have Elena and Rebecca kind of like having this bonding moment when they're talking about the homecoming dance. Rebecca is really excited to go, and we have this moment where Elena stakes Rebecca and she betrays her in that moment. And so why this is important is because one, Rebecca thought like they were bonding, and she was really excited to go to that dance because she had never been to a dance before. And if you've watched all of the past seasons, you know that Rebecca is this type of person who wants to be loved, and she hasn't really had success with love, and so she is what they would say like a foolish girl because she's believing all of these different men and they're screwing her over and that sort of thing. And so she is obviously really betrayed by the fact that Elena did this to her in this really vulnerable position that she was in and took away this moment that she was happy to experience. Then what ends up happening is we have Stefan kind of interfering with their plan to stake Klaus, and Klaus ends up staking Michael, who is threatening to go after Elena at this point, but it's actually Catherine. And so with Klaus staking Michael, somehow Stefan is no longer compelled to listen to Klaus. I can't recall how that exactly happened, but Stefan is basically being rewarded or whatever for coming to Klaus's aid instead of joining the gang and attacking Klaus. However, Stefan is really mad, and at this point he starts to double cross Klaus. He ends up stealing these coffins that Klaus has. In these coffins are his other siblings, and there is one particular coffin that they can't open. It is spelled shut. And so this is where Bonnie comes in, and she realizes that she needs her mom's help in opening the coffin. And so this leads to her kind of going to find her mom and actually finding her. And the reason why she needs her mom is because the coffin was originally spelled shut by Bennett witches, and so they need two Bennett witches or whatever to be able to undo the spell. And so here we're really learning a lot about Bonnie's relationship with her mother. It is fractured because her mom left her when she was super young, and then when she meets her mother, she finds out that her mother is raising someone else's kid as her own, and she has this bond with this kid. And so obviously Bonnie is really upset by this, and I think at this point Bonnie's mother had lost her magic as well, and I don't think she can do magic at this point. And a big part of why she left because she felt like she wasn't who she was anymore, and she also kind of got a fresh start. We also learned that when they awoke Michael, I think Catherine and Damon were responsible for Michael being awakened and that sort of thing. It was actually Bonnie's mother who did that to him, and I think that was what caused her to lose her powers. And just for reference, Bonnie's mother's name is Abby. And so once you're able to find Bonnie's mother, we do have this scene, I think, where Bonnie and Elena are at Abby's house. And I think the son's name is like Jamie or something like that. And I think he's the kid from One on One, that TV show with Kyla Pratt or whatever her name is. And what happens is somebody basically got there before them. They were kind of compelled to do certain things and like attack them if they didn't listen to what Jamie was saying. And so they're able to eventually get back to Mystic Falls, and they're able to work on the coffin, get it unspelled. And what we find out is that Esther, the original witch, the original's mother, is in the coffin, and she is awakened. And so we also have, as a side note to all of that, we have Stefan doing a lot of crazy stuff. He is risking Elena's life. He's pissed off. He wants to anger Klaus. He's beheading people, like beheading other hybrids, that sort of thing. He's really doing a lot to anger Klaus, and he ends up undaggering Elijah. And this is huge because Elijah can be a huge enemy of Klaus's and be on their sides. And then the other thing that we have happening is that we know that Klaus is really trying to get these coffins back, and at the same time of them trying to open the coffin, we have Klaus going to Elena and Damon trying to get them to help him. They refuse, and he ends up having Jeremy run over by his hybrids. Alaric is able to push him out of the way and save him, but with Alaric being run over, he obviously comes back to life, but he has trouble healing, and so he needs vampire blood. We're also kind of reunited with Dr. Fell, who's also heavily involved in this season, and she is able to kind of like dig into what's going on with him. And what it turns out is that he is actually committing different murders in the city because of the ring that he's wearing. It's causing him to block out and go into another state where he is harming people. And Dr. Fell is the person who is able to figure this out because they have their ancestors' journals, and she's also part of the council, so she knows what's going on. And so what Elena does to get Klaus to back off is she tells him that if he'll back off of harming Jeremy, basically, she will return Rebecca's body to him. The body is obviously daggered, and she does make a point to tell him, hey, Rebecca knows that you killed your mother, and so this leads to Klaus taking Rebecca's body back, but he doesn't undagger her because he knows that he's going to have to deal with her wrath. And then we also have a moment where Damon and Elena kiss, and this is not their first kiss in this season. For the third key point, we have Esther wants to kill all of her children. Once Esther is awake, she ends up inviting the whole gang to come to a ball at her house with her family, and they're basically all forced to attend. And what she wants to do is she wants to link all of her original children together so that if you kill one, they all die. And so Esther has this one son, Finn, who is basically willing to sacrifice himself to kill the others. So once they're all linked, she's going to kill him, and then the others are going to die. And so Elena knows that this is happening, and at this point, her and Elijah are kind of like developing their relationship, and there's this moment where she could tell him what his mother is planning to do, but she doesn't, and so he kind of uses this against her a little bit later on in the season because she totally could have been honest with him and told him what the plan was. And so we do have this moment where Esther is drawing power from the Bennett witches, and she is doing this in order to complete some spell. I can't recall if this is related to her wanting to link the children, but there's something that she wants to do, and she needs power specifically from somebody in the Bennett family line. And so what this leads to is this moment where she is doing some ritual at this old house, and it's the site of where I think 100 or so witches were killed, and so through the Bennett witches she's able to absorb all of that power. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, at the same time, there is this moment where basically Stefan and Damon have to choose whether they're going to basically hurt or kill Bonnie or her mother. And so they end up going after Bonnie's mom, Abby, and she's turned into a vampire in order to save Elena. And so Damon is the one who does this because he's okay with being the bad guy, and obviously Stefan won't have to deal with being the bad guy and hurting Bonnie because obviously Bonnie's mom doesn't want to be a vampire, she's a witch, and so this is obviously going to ruin a lot of relationships because this happened. And then one major thing that we learned is that with Esther linking all of the originals, when you actually kill one original, you are killing the entire bloodline that was created from the people that they turned into vampires. And so what they then try to do is basically unlink the originals so that they can just kill the person that they want to kill. And so this leads to a game of figuring out whose side of their line, and if they kill this original, is this going to cause someone that they love to die, and that sort of thing. So it really becomes a guessing game. We also have, during this time of key point number 3, of Caroline, as I mentioned, being wooed by house during this time. He has drawn a picture of her. He's a really good artist, and he's gifting her with all of these dresses and jewelry. He's really into her. He's letting her know that, you know, this small time life is not going to be for you. Eventually, you're going to get tired of it, basically. Tyler's not the right person for you, that sort of thing. And so he's really heavily pursuing her, and she is just rejecting him at every turn. We also have Damon sleeping with Rebecca at some point. This is a huge betrayal for Elena because once Rebecca has been undaggered, she knows that Elena daggered her, and so with Damon wanting to sleep with Rebecca, this is just a huge betrayal because he's sleeping with the person who's trying to kill the girl that he's in love with, and so that just obviously sends mixed signals and that sort of thing. And so it's a huge blow to Elena, and they kind of have to work through those feelings of the betrayal that each other is feeling. Obviously, Damon doesn't like being rejected by Elena, and then Elena doesn't like him sleeping with Rebecca and whatever. We also have this flashback to 1912, and here's where we learn a lot more about the Gilbert family ring. We are introduced to an ancestor named Sarah Gilbert, and we are also introduced to Sage, who was Finn's girlfriend. And so, what we learned about the Gilbert family ring is that there was basically an ancestor in the Gilbert family who went crazy from wearing this ring, and so wearing the ring after a certain point is not going to be good because it basically kills a piece of you with every time that you come back to life. And so, on the other hand, with Sage, she is aware of this plan to kill the originals, and she doesn't want this because she's just finally getting reunited with Finn. She's been looking for him for a long time, whatever, and she's really happy that he's back. And so they have a moment to reunite, and she ends up going to the originals and she tells them about this plan to basically kill the originals at their link, and they end up burning the Wickery Bridge, which was made of white oak, and white oak is what can be used to kill a original. And so she does this in order to save Finn's life. And so what happened is, I think they still had, maybe jumping around a little bit, but at one point they were able to create white oak stakes, but they lost them, and then the Wickery Bridge was like their last chance of like creating it or whatever, and this kind of created complications for them going forward. And then one other thing I want to touch on with the Gilbert ring, just to backtrack a little bit, we have a situation where, in addition to Alaric being run over with the car and coming back to life and needing vampire blood, there is a situation where he's attacked and he needs to be killed by someone supernatural. And so Elena ends up killing him, and then he is able to come back. But this completely kind of changes him. He's already changing, but this kind of seals the fact that he is really changing. And then another thing I want to talk about is Damon. So Damon ends up being taken captured by Rebecca, and he's tortured by her. She's playing with his head. She's making him think that he's kissing Elena, that sort of thing. Stefan has to come and free him. In exchange for freeing him, Stefan is supposed to bring the white oak stakes that they were using to kill the originals. He only brings some of it, but then she forces Damon to tell him how many there really are. And so this, I think, is kind of what leads to the Wickery Bridge being burned. But then there's a sign that is untouched, and that sign is made of white oak material, whatever. And so they are able to make more weapons. Going into the fourth point, Damon and Elena kiss again, and this is a much more passionate kiss. And so we have Damon and Elena going on a road trip to get Jeremy from college. Previously, when he had been run over, they had basically compelled him to leave town. And this was a huge issue because Jeremy was really upset when he found out that Elena had him compelled to forget what happened to Vicky, or forget that he was close with Vicky, because he didn't like the grieving process basically being taken away from him, because he could feel that something was wrong. And so here we have Elena making the decision to compel him again. Her and Bonnie fall out over this because obviously this is not what Jeremy would want. And so we have this moment where Elena wants to go and get her brother and bring him back, and she is forced to go on a road trip with Damon so that they can figure out their feelings, because I think she told Stefan that they kissed, and Stefan is obviously upset about this, but he wants to know for sure that he's the one for her, and so he makes her have this time with Damon. And so what this leads to is Damon and Elena growing closer, and we have this moment where, because Stefan is pushing Elena away, they obviously continue to get closer, and then they have this moment where they kiss. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is when I think Rose comes back and she ends up being in the car next to Jeremy, and she tells him that Damon and Elena are actually really good for each other because they challenge each other in ways that Stefan isn't able to challenge Elena. And another thing that happens is, with Alaric having died too many times while wearing the ring, he now has this alter ego that causes him to kill vampires or people who are helping them. And so he is obviously blacking out during this point, so he doesn't remember anything that he's doing. He's killed 2 or 3 people, and he also killed Caroline's dad. So we have this moment where I talked about Caroline being tortured by her dad. He also was kind of recruited to help Tyler deal with the sour bond that he had with Klaus. And so Caroline's dad, Bill, told Tyler that the only way to break the sour bond was to make that transition into a werewolf. And the more that he did it, the more it would help him break that bond, and it would kind of make transitioning easier for him and less painful. And so we have this moment where Bill is attacked by Alaric. He needs vampire blood, and then he's attacked again, and he turns into a vampire, and he needs to feed on human blood in order to make that transition, but he refuses to do so, and he dies. He chooses to die. And so, going back to Alaric, we have this moment where he is not aware of his alter ego, and we have Dr. Fell kind of putting the pieces together, and she's able to realize that something bad is happening to him, and she's able to figure out that it's connected to the ring. We get the backstory of what the ring is doing to him through Sarah Gilbert's story, and then we also learn that the alter ego hid one of the White Oak stakes, and so this is problematic because they need to give it to the originals in order to like free Damon or at least negotiate for peace. And so this is obviously not good that he has hidden a weapon that can kill the originals, and also he's hell-bent on killing other vampires as well. And so we do have this moment where Esther ends up turning Alaric into someone who is more like the originals, and he is now a vampire who hunts the originals. So before, I think he was just killing people who were helping vampires, regular vampires. Now she's kind of engineered him to specifically go after the originals. And so she also binds his life to Elena so that he can't live forever. And this is problematic because obviously you don't want Elena's life to be in danger in any kind of way. So if people want to kill Alaric, they're going to obviously go after Elena. So this is kind of problematic that they are bound together. And then we also have Alaric in his villain era because of that alter ego, and he ends up trying to take over the council, and he outs Liz and Carol to the council for having supernatural kids. And so he's saying, this council is meant to protect the city from vampires and the supernatural, whatever, but you have 2 people who are part of the council, and they have kids who are supernatural, and they're kind of not helping the city in a sense, is what he's trying to argue. And so he kind of gets them kicked out and exposed and all of that stuff. And so we do have another moment happening. I don't have much to say about this, so it's literally just going to be what happened. We have this moment where Klaus is attacked, and Bonnie makes an agreement with Klaus to move him to another body, and so she moves him into Tyler's body. And so I think when he is staked after the originals are separated, they're trying to see who dies from that, but nobody dies, but it's only because Klaus has been moved to a different body. And so I think they are mistakenly under the impression that he didn't sire the line, but that's not the case because he was just moved to a different body. And now going into our 5th key point, Elena dies. So we have this moment where Jeremy and Matt are trying to get Elena out of town. I think we have Stefan, who is dying, and we have Damon, who is dying. I can't recall what exactly leads them to be in this situation, but we have Elena and Jeremy and Matt lying to Alaric about where Klaus's body is because obviously he wants to kill an original. And then we have Matt being forced to drug Elena in order to get her out of town, and she has to choose who she wants to say goodbye to, Stefan or Damon, and she chooses Stefan. And then kind of going off onto a different point, we have at this point the originals are still wanting to take out Alaric because he's after them, and they are not willing to make a deal with everyone else regarding this because they didn't get Klaus back. So there was supposed to be some sort of exchange that didn't happen, and so now kind of everyone is fair game. And so this leads to Rebecca going after Elena again for daggering her, and she causes this car crash to happen in the exact same place where Elena's parents died. And so we have Stefan able to react, and he goes and he tries to save Elena, but she tells him to save Matt first, and she ends up dying. And so one thing that was revealed in this conversation that Elena had with Damon just before she died was that she was obviously making it clear that she was choosing Stefan over him. She wanted to go see Stefan before he died, and or something like that. And then she ends up saying, well, if only we had met first. And so then we get this flashback, and we actually learn that she did meet Damon first. She met him while she was kind of like at some party. She was kind of like on the road. They were in the woods partying. She was on the side of the road. He came up and talked to her because he thought that she was Catherine. And then this car was coming, and he compelled her to forget ever meeting him. And so we know that if it's true that she wished she had met him first, she actually did. And so we know that that's going to change the nature of the relationship once she actually realizes that they met first. And so we have, going back to Stefan saving Matt, Elena obviously dies, and what comes out is that Elena had been in some sort of accident earlier in the season, and it actually caused a traumatic brain injury, and so her injuries were way worse than Dr. Fell had let on. She ended up having to give her vampire blood in order to save her, and so when Elena died, she died with vampire blood in her system, and so we see her on the table and we see her waking up, and we realize that in the next season she's going to have to deal with being a vampire. Alrighty, so to go ahead and wrap up this episode, I've obviously already finished season 4 as I was talking about in the intro. If you haven't seen the next seasons, the natural thoughts of what you would want to know going into season 4 are you're going to obviously want to know what will happen to Elena, what will her transition be like, who will she choose to be with, how will she adjust to being a vampire, and then we also are going to want to know what is going to happen with Jeremy and Bonnie, being that he cheated on her with Anna. She was unhappy when she found out that sort of thing. How is Bonnie going to deal with her mom being a vampire? How is she going to feel about Elena for being the reason that her mom was turned into a vampire? So we have all of these different relationships that are going to be impacted going into season 4. And then we're obviously dealing with Alaric being a vampire hunter, being crazy, being something that they can't control. And so season 4 is going to definitely be interesting, and I'm excited to do that episode. So I think this is where we'll go ahead and end. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.